So thanks, everyone. So I was saying, yeah, obviously food, how to keep up the production. We're going to have, the planet is going to be having billions more people on it. They want to eat. And the people who are, there's many billions already here, especially in developing countries, the more income they have, the more meat they want to eat. And as we've already heard from Seth, that puts a lot of extra strain on the environment, and both the environment and the human environment as well. So that is going to be an issue. So two things to think about probably. First of all, how do we increase from the production side, how do we produce more food, and what type of food should we be producing? How can we produce more of it with less resources? That's one big question we're going to try to cover. And the other one is from the demand side, how do we try to get people to eat more sustainably, maybe eat different things, or certainly waste less. So those are the two sort of big, from the production side, how do we get food more sustainable, and from the demand side, how do we make it more sustainable? So starting, I'm just going to throw some questions out and direct them a little bit, but you're all going to feel free to jump in as and when, and if you don't agree, that's even better. So on the technology side, Seth, you talked a little bit already about some of the technological advances, but what do you think holds out the most hope on the, you've been talking about on GMO side maybe, but also any other technologies, what do you think it really holds out the most hope for the next 50 years, for instance?
I think that
near-term and long-term, yeah.
There are just a tremendously large number of opportunities to use technology to fix the food system. I think the food is basically broken from top to bottom. Never before have we lived in a time where people are both dying because of malnutrition and lack of access to nutrition, but also, especially in places like the States, dying in places of food abundance. Yep. Because the food that they're eating is poison. And so I think that basically across the food spectrum, there's incredible opportunity for innovation. Obviously, cellular agriculture and clean meat, I think, is very, very exciting. It's one of the sort of step leaps forward. I'm also very excited about what we can do with plant-based meats. I think in terms of things like indoor agriculture, there's an incredible promise. And then I am just incredibly excited about the potential for using technologies like CRISPR to modify food quicker than we've done before.
Can you just clarify CRISPR being a form of genetic engineering?
Yeah, so basically, humans have been genetically modifying food for thousands of years. Every time we take a type of corn that grows really tall and another type of corn that grows really thick, and we crossbreed them when they wouldn't otherwise, we have now genetically modified a new organism. And we can now, instead of having to literally take those things and make them breed, we can just go in and edit them the way we want to edit them. So this is known as GMO. I know it scares a lot of people, but it's really something that we've been doing for a long time. In the States, actually, as of 3 weeks ago, they gave some regulatory guidance that I think is incredibly exciting. They said if you could get the organism that you're modifying through crossbreeding, then it's automatically approved. Right? So basically, if you could get there the way we've been doing it for thousands of years, but you're just using these new genetic techniques to get there faster. And of course, hence more cheaply, which is good for the food system, then it's automatically approved. I think that offers tremendous promise in terms of eliminating malnutrition and creating healthy, sustainable food that is also affordable.
Are there any particular examples of things that are being worked on that could seriously help some countries that are in really need?
I think golden rice is a phenomenal example. It's a form of rice that has been modified to have beta-carotene in it, which is a precursor to vitamin A. In India, there's a lot of people that are vitamin A deficient, and this is a great way of getting them that nutrient through a staple product that they already eat.
Okay, so pro-GMO.
I think it has the ability to save hundreds of millions of lives
Europeans,
a year.
French, if there are any French people, please listen to this message. Obviously, French are very emotional about food.
I do want to say one thing, because I'm very passionate about it. So the scientific consensus around climate change is basically like 99 scientists will say, yes, this is obviously happening, for every one that doesn't. If you look at the scientific consensus around GMO, it is exactly the same. For every one scientist that says, hold on, I don't know if this GMO thing is safe, you will find 99 scientists that say that it is completely safe and well studied, so long as the techniques are done in a way that is understood.
Okay. Sounds encouraging. Again, tell that to the French. Mattias, you got some views on either GMO or other ways to on the food production side?
As a consumer, I obviously have kind of problem with GMO, but if I'm thinking realistically, that's the way definitely to go. And also, I'm working with plants. We see how big potential there is. A simple example: we can grow algae very quickly. The photosynthesis of algae is 8 times quicker than photosynthesis of any other plant. So can you imagine we could grow lettuce 8 times quicker, or whatever plants? So I think there lies huge potential.
Okay, Peter, do you have anything to say on the food production front? Improved efficiency, other things you can.
I can add something in the context of what I do, which is meat production, which is kind of interesting because coming from me, it might sound strange, but we don't really need to do this. I mean, we can live perfectly well on a plant-based diet, as Seth just said. So that's not the point. The point is that we're not willing to do it. And books have been written about why. But somehow we're hardwired to love these animal-based products, which probably has something to do with our history. So we've been raising animals for like 10,000 years now, improving their processes. Essentially, that's genetic modification as well, in animals as well, crossbreeding to a point where it's crazy today, actually. And from an efficiency point of view, one might argue that given that we use an animal as a system to do this, we've done a pretty good job. They're good products. And as I said, we've gone crazy in the efficiency of the amount of meat that's stuck to a cow or to a chicken, or the speed at which they grow, or what have you. And we're killing 3,000 chickens per second on this planet. So 1, 2, 6,000 chickens gone. Yeah, it's crazy. But now we're starting to understand, and this is the exciting thing, we're starting to understand how all those production systems work on the level of the cell, and more we're capable of isolating those systems from the animal. And actually, it sounds a bit cocky, but we're capable of doing better than nature, which is something of a paradox compared to all the naturalness and you know, bio craving there is today as well. But we can. Nature is great, don't get me wrong, but we can do just better. And cellular agriculture is a great example of that. And in the case of meat, as I just said in my introduction, we do it because we don't want to let go of meat in our diet for now. And it's essentially, it's just a better way to produce exactly the same product. It's a bypass.
How close are we, or let's say your company, for instance, how close are you to actually mass producing clean meat that people will want to eat?
Oh, mass production will be a while, because that's about scaling up, and scaling up is about a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money if you look at the size of the meat business. But if you're looking at how close we are to, let's say, having a blueprint ready.
Yes, being in a position to, if you have
knowing how to do this. It depends on who you ask. If you were to ask me, a couple of years, 2, maybe 3. Some of the timings of some of our colleagues in the field are a little bit more aggressive, some are a little bit less aggressive. But within a couple of years, we'll be at the point where we're able to say, this is exactly how we do it. And now let's get those hundreds of millions or billions together and start scaling up this industry, because it's all about scaling up. If you want to get the price to the level that is required to get it to retail, to get it to consumer acceptance, broad consumer acceptance, you need to get the price down to the level that people are used to today. And that's all about scaling up. That's not about technology, that's not about fundamental science, that's just about putting money towards it and making it big.
Talking about the consumer side, though, there might be some resistance. I mean, some people call it lab meat. You probably prefer to call it clean meat. I don't know what you're eventually going to call it, but the logical side, obviously, it all makes sense, but consumers, as we were talking before, people are not always logical when it comes to food, even less than when it comes to French people and food, even less. The love affair of some cultures with food. How do you think that's going to play out? Now, I want to bring Päivi in here as well, because you have a food service business as part of your group, and you're in touch with a mass market of consumers. So, first of all, what are you going to call it?
Yeah, I'm actually not too worried about consumer acceptance.
No. Because?
Because, well, first of all, because based on what we know so far from consumer surveys, and I know the real thing happens when you're in the shop, in the supermarket with your shopping cart, and you actually decide to buy something. That's when it happens. But if you ask consumers today, there's a pretty large number of them, actually 50+%, who say they understand we do this, and they say they're willing to buy these products once they come to the market. It's quite consistently so.
Okay, I'm going to put that to the test now. I know we are in Estonia, but I'm just going to try a quick test here. We have consumers right in front of us. Hands up, who's a consumer? Everyone's hand should go up. Great, so that's a good practice. Now, within those people, if just the general idea of eating meat that is not from animals, that as has been described as being grown, would you be okay with that idea, at least giving it a try? Well done, we're in. Excellent.
Thank you.
Päivi.
Yeah, so at Fazer, or actually Fazer, like we say in our home markets. So at Fazer we have a little bit like a different kind of approach to this meat replacement. So we strongly believe in like actually oats, like as an ingredient. We see it as like a superfood, and we are building now like non-dairy products and meal replacements based on oats. And when it comes to Seth mentioned the kind of the functionalities and the taste of non-dairy milks, for example, at the moment. So we are putting a lot of like investment in making the taste better and the function so that you can use it as a milk. So that is our approach in that area. And when it comes to our like food services, so in the business, so there we, for example, are using these kind of more soft methods, helping people we do this, it's called like nudging, so that kind of a method that we kind of make people to put more like vegetables and all that to their plates before they go to the meat, and by doing this nudging, we have been able to reduce the consumption of meat like significantly, only like with the psychological ways.
Can I also one more question for the audience. How many of you would be cool with eating meat which, through the processing and production process, had fecal bacteria on it? So bacteria from poop. Raise your hand. Okay.
Trick question.
Yeah, I saw like 6 hands. Every single piece of meat that you buy in a supermarket has fecal contaminant in it. It is unavoidable to slaughter an animal without fecal contaminant getting into the meat. And the reason I ask that is because people don't love meat because of how it's made. They love meat despite how it's made.
Correct.
We love to eat it. We love the taste. We love the culture around it. Most people, if you ask them, would you eat meat that was produced this way, and you actually highlighted how it's made, would say, absolutely not, no way, I don't want anything to do with that. And so I think a lot of this just comes with consumer education. I think people will be very, very excited about it. And I think one of the interesting things, if you look at the New York Times op-eds when cell phones came out, it was absolutely, people were horrified, right? If you were talking on the cell phone in public, you were considered like a leper. You were like, you should get out of society. And now, of course, we do it all the time. When things are introduced, there is a hesitancy when they're new, but I think people will become very, very comfortable with this. And by the way, why is clean meat a term that's used for this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that there's no fecal contaminant in it because it's grown in a sterile environment, which is pretty exciting.
You might say no shit. Okay.
No, there's no shit in this meat.
I'll believe you.
And then also, of course, it's called clean meat because of the environmental implications that we talked about.
Okay. Just going to push a little bit of pushback on there, because we're talking before about the taste. And I asked, have you, Peter, actually tasted it? And you did admit that it doesn't have a taste per se yet, because there's other things like what makes meat taste good. Is part of the fat and the blood and all these other nasty things that make it taste good. So how are you going to deal with the taste aspect? So not just the purely functional aspect, but to make people really want it, or you're just going to slather it with sauce, duck à l'orange type style, or what?
Well, to start off with that latter point, you mentioned much of the processed meat actually has flavorings in it. So that's point one. But having said that, I was referring to this hamburger we made 5 years ago, which consisted only of muscle fibers and nothing more. It was pure muscle fibers. In that sense, it was a proof of concept. So it had the texture of meat, but it didn't have the taste of meat. The taste of meat comes from other stuff, from preparing it, but also from the fat, from the blood. Well, it's not really blood, but it's a specific molecule that's in meat. And you just need that to be present. So we've been working ever since on growing fat tissue, which we're capable of doing now. And we've been working on expressing this particular, let's say, bloodish molecule from our cells, which is something that you can also do from plants, by the way. So it doesn't really matter where you get it from. It's just a molecule that needs to be present. So we're just adding the components that are relevant for the taste. We're confident, well, actually, we're pretty sure that we're going to match the taste of traditional meat. There's a lot of myth around the taste of meat as well. If you do blind tastings of meat, a lot of those differences of grass-fed or biologically raised or what have you, they will sort of drop in a gray area. Which I know because I come from the meat industry, actually. So.
Okay. Yep. Last question on the meat front, then we'll move on. The inputs that you're using, what are you making the meat out of, and is there any cost to the planet from that?
That's a good point. This is for me. This is arguably the most essential part of this whole development right now. It is getting the cost of the food that we give to the cells down to the level that makes the meat cheap enough to sell large scale in retail. So the feed we give to the cells is a mix of sugars, fatty acids, amino acids, just your regular food. You can compare it to infant feed. That's something I compare it to. I like to compare it to. And maybe you can even compare the industry that's going to produce it, big scale at some point also to that industry, by the way. But today it's a pharmaceutical ingredient, which is crazy expensive and has crazy quality assurance associated with it. And there's hardly any production in the world. And there's a huge feed production in the world to feed animals. And somewhere in the middle of those two, there's a gray area, and we need to build a supply chain there that produces cell food at a large scale. If that doesn't happen, the meat will never become cheap enough to sell.
Okay, so the future of meat is clean, but it needs a lot of money to get going. So if anyone has any money, you know who to give it to, if you're interested in that. Okay, so moving on, there's a sort of big topic, reconciling the demand for people want to eat more sustainably. They like the idea of it, but they're not really willing to pay for it. They still want cheapest food. There was I don't know if anyone's heard of Jamie Oliver, a celebrity chef in the UK. He did a big campaign. Actually, that's a different one. Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. Anyway, HL, the celebrity chef, did a campaign in the UK to get people more aware of the chickens, battery chickens, and then he showed that he actually got people to grow their own chickens, and they started paying more for chickens in the store. But a couple of weeks later, they went back to buying their cheap chicken. They said, "Well, I just need to spend money on other stuff." So there's a demand for cheap food, and how do you reconcile the demand for cheap food, not just in developing countries, but even in Western countries like UK and US, with the desire to be more sustainable? So reducing waste is an obvious way. I don't know how many hundreds of millions of tons are thrown away. Education? How do we go about reducing from the waste side? And obviously, if you're wasting less, you're buying less. Therefore, it's cheaper. That's one way. Päivi, have you got a?
Yeah, it's actually a good point that 1/3 of the food waste is 1/3 of food is going to waste. So it's and the majority is coming from.
So that's 1/3 less we'd need to
produce. Yeah. So we should be like, and it's because that we don't really care and we don't pay attention to that how much food we throw out. So we need to kind of be more educated about that and also pay attention to that. And that is maybe one way how the industry can also help.
So who would be educating? Would, let's say, your company as a food service company be all the producers? Or
that too, and for example, in our restaurants and especially in schools and universities, so we are running campaigns and weighing the waste, making it visible to children and young people that how much food they are actually throwing away. And that, of course, helps, that we can see in the statistics.
Okay. Mattias, we were talking before, I think you had a view on how we could maybe more local production.
Yes, I think local production, hyper-local production is definitely one way to go, and as we are building tools for hyper-local production, there are plenty of other tools, easy to build, like, for example, bioreactors. We could grow different things at home. For example, like, why buy oranges from Spain if you want to have orange juice? You actually could grow cell culture in your kitchen, in your small bioreactor, and get your juice right from there. But also, like, if you're thinking about fall agriculture and especially plants, then we have huge costs and problems in production. We have huge problems in logistics, huge problems in retail with waste rate, etc., etc. So my actually idea was to solve all those problems at once. And actually, if you think about 150 years ago, we had such kind of perfect system, very sustainable system. Everybody had their own small plot of land, and most of the food was produced hyper-locally. The only problem we had back then was that we didn't have tools. But today, you can basically grow enough greens, like lettuces, tomatoes, also potatoes, and these kind of things, for a family of 4 on the wall area that is approximately 7 to 12 square meters. So basically, back here, you can grow most of the needed plants for a family of 4.
I guess, I mean, that's obviously a solution for urban areas. The Estonians here, most of you, you've got a lot of land and not many people, so it's much less of a problem. My wife is Estonian, and when I go to stay at their place, they're producing everything outside. But in the urban areas, where increasingly in emerging markets as well, just everyone's coming to the towns, putting more and more pressure, and that's where the problem where you have to bring food from a long way, from the farms which are further away, and you're saying you could do it on your wall.
Exactly.
You could make potatoes on your wall.
Basically, yes.
I'm looking forward to having some wall-grown potatoes at home. We'll see how that goes down in my household. But no, that's pretty interesting. The other thing that I've noticed is the biggest from my custom. I work with supermarkets. I try to bring big innovation to big supermarkets, which is almost a contradiction in terms, because obviously when you bring innovation to a big company, they say, who else is doing it? Okay, it's innovation, But and the biggest unmet need we have, that supermarket customers have, all of you, I presume everyone here goes to a supermarket pretty much, unless you live in the country and produce everything yourself. But the biggest unmet need is people want help to eat more healthily and more sustainably, but they're not actually getting any help. Very little help from the supermarkets. You get a few online sites. The people who sell in supermarkets on the front line know less about what they're selling than their customers. They're very poorly trained and paid, the cashiers, etc. So in terms of education, I'm wondering what can be done to, like that figure of 1/3 of food goes to waste. Some of it is in the transportation. Actually, I'm not sure that includes transportation, I think. So growing hyperlocally can help that. But in terms of just helping people to waste less, like don't put tomatoes in the fridge. Tomatoes go off more quickly in the fridge. 90% of people who buy tomatoes stick them in the fridge. It'd be great not to know that. What do you think can be done? Anyone want to jump in on that?
Well, I just first want to say, I think a great name for an indie rock band would be the Wall Potatoes. But that's neither here nor there. I've largely given up on education. I gave up meat when I was 12 and have been very vocal about why. I think the environmental argument is very clear. I think the animal welfare argument is very clear. I think I've maybe convinced of my friend group 12 people to give up meat. And these are like a captive audience who share my values, whose language I share, so I can make a really great case to them. I can make it over the course of years. And only 12 people, for me, shows that educating is not necessarily the best solution. And so I would prefer to make it super easy for those supermarkets to make money in their business models while offering people food that is both cheap and nutritious and sustainable, right? So, you ask, how do we teach people to not put their tomatoes in the fridge? I more think, how can we make tomatoes where it doesn't matter if you put them in the fridge or not, and they just last longer, right? And so I would like to sort of change the rules of the game through things like, I think clean meat is a really great example of that, so that people can continue along the trajectory that they're on without having the health or sustainability problems that the current food system offers. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't necessarily agree fully on the giving up on education for various reasons. I'm not going to go into them right now. I think the science on the meat-eating front in terms of small amounts, good quality, is not so clear to make a very strong argument on that, but
I think it's incredibly clear. I think the World Health Organization has defined red meat as a class 2 carcinogen, meaning it causes cancer. It is healthy in small quantities in the same way that cigarettes are healthy in small quantities. It is not necessary for the body. A plant-based diet is without a doubt the healthiest. But people they either don't know or they don't want to know, and it's very hard to change people's habits, right? And especially a lot of the things are culturally very ingrained. So, and my idea is just better to give people what they want, but without any of the negative effects.
Anyone wants to stand up a bit for education?
No, I actually agree, and I would maybe put it a little bit stronger. We're not trying to change a habit, we're trying to change an addiction, which is even harder.
So you're saying, in terms, maybe let's move away from the meat for a second then, and go to the other stuff, the stuff you like, the plants. For instance, like we're told we should eat 5 fruit and veg a day. We're told they're full of antioxidants. No one knows what an antioxidant is. No one knows why we should eat fruit and veg. We're just told that we should. And it's an interesting point when you said when you got people to to have a bit of green stuff first, they ate less meat afterwards. So maybe there's a way, that wasn't necessarily education, that was more stimulation. But if people understood more why it's good to, rather than the bad, not why meat is bad, they may not go for that, but if you push more why something's good, they might react better. Or we're just going to move on from education. Is anyone going to help me out here?
I'm just afraid that I kind of see the problem with the education part, because in the restaurants, so we have tried to kind of do the education part, but people don't really pay attention to anything on the information or anything. So they just go and see that what looks like delicious. So the taste is very important. So they are not like taking any new information in that situation when they are selecting the food. So
okay, well,
I'm really sorry about that.
Okay, no, I'm not doing up an education. I've actually created a program to try to teach supermarket staff the basics of what is or isn't good for you, and how to store food and stuff like that. But so I'm not giving up, despite the downer here. Maybe the government. Surely the government can help. What's the government's role in helping to make the future of food more sustainable? Let's swiftly moving on.
I've completely given up on government. No, I'm joking. I think government can actually play a pretty big role here by doing. I think there's 2 things. One is they can stop supporting a lot of these industries through subsidies that are destructive for the environment or not good for people's health. Especially in the States, which is where I come from, the meat and dairy industry is very heavily subsidized. So the cost that you're paying actually is not the cost of production, and that leads to a lot of negative externalities. So A, they can just stop doing that for industries that aren't good for the environment or for people's health. And then B, they could, of course, help industries that are, right? I think a lot of countries are actually very forward-looking in terms of things like clean meat or plant-based diets now even. I think they've started to see a lot of the research coming out of organizations like the World Health Organization, and they've realized that it's better for their population to eat more plant-based. And so there's been a lot of initiatives I think the best initiatives are always around like taxation, right? So like make it cheaper for people to eat more healthy, make it more expensive for people to eat less healthy.
So, for instance, in the UK, and other countries, they're looking at it, just put on a sugar tax, which my guess is Fazer. problem is the name of your company doesn't come out well in English, Fazer. Yeah. No, it doesn't, because maybe it does what it says on the tin. You're eating lots of chocolate, but Fazer. But I'm going to still call it Fazer if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What's your view then on working with the government? Like, is taxing sugar, for instance, one way to go, or
yeah.
Seth is nodding like crazy, but so you're hopefully going to say no, we don't want that. It's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, I'm more like in this. It's not typical that a Finn kind of says good things about the Swedes and Sweden, but now I'm making this exception. So in Sweden, for example, they have created this food strategy for Sweden, like a national food strategy, and currently they're also working on a food tech strategy. And I think it's a good thing because that kind of sets the vision for the whole industry, and they are together like the governmental organizations, universities, researchers, big companies, and also startups. So that together set the kind of the visions, and then there is also the power to impact the kind of regulation and politics. And what Sweden has also done is that they're also investing in creating the future of food. So they have funds, and that is now available, for example, for startups or even research. So we are, for example, one of our scientists in Finland is actually now moving in the autumn to Sweden to study with governmental funding from
actually
Sweden.
Moving to Sweden. Wow.
And with the money of the Swedish government and study. But that is kind of the game of the future, that we are working more together and having these open innovation ecosystems, and in that way creating the future of food.
Okay. Anything more on the government? Otherwise, I might. Yep.
Well, there is something of a struggle there as well. The interesting thing is, it's many of these developments are a mix of or a combination of both something that is potentially societal, extremely important in the future, but also commercially extremely important. So that's a strange choice for governments to make in terms of when it comes to money. There's a tendency to leave that to businesses and not to involve too much. Having said that, we are talking with the Dutch government currently to include them as an investor in our company, which is good. Probably for us, the biggest impact governments can have is in the field of regulation. So you need to get your product to the market, you need to get it approved to get to the market, and there's all sorts of dynamics that play into that process, ranging from the existing business opposing it to scientists not believing in it to what have you. Anything goes. So that's a whole process, which in the European Union means you go to the novel food process. You need to get it approved, and that's where governments can play a role in smoothing that a little bit.
We're going to have time for, I'm just going to take, if there are any burning questions from the audience. There's one burning one right there, hand up. We're going to have time for two. Obviously, please make it short and sweet. While we're getting the mic ready, I'm just going to ask the panel to prepare in the last 10 seconds when we finish the questions, one word from each of you to summarize the future of sustainable food. So you've got 4 minutes to think about your one word to summarize the future of sustainable food. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I'm representing a data company that provides data for farmers. Actually, farming business is one of the ugliest invention of humankind, maybe. I mean, this is ugly. I mean, 10,000 years ago, it was invented, and now after fertilizer, the machinery, and the genetics technology, the human population reaches above 7.5 billion. So do you think the clean meat technology could boost it over 10 billion in the near future? And is it good for human or the world capacity? Thank you.
Did you understand the question?
Yeah. I think I do, yeah. The short answer is yes, I definitely think so. It's way less resource intensive than traditional meat production is. It's healthier, arguably, than traditional meat production is. It's less, it's more detached, if you like. So you can, in terms of food security, there's also all sorts of opportunities associated with this technology. that are not there today. You can produce it in the craziest places on this planet. So yes, I think with all that in mind, I don't only think it's a contribution to that, I think it's a necessity because it's just not going to fit. If our meat craving is going to continue the way it does and our wealth is going to increase the way it's supposed to go, it's not even an ethical or a moral problem anymore. It's just not going to fit on this planet, the production system.
Good answer. One more burning question. Yes, sir, you have the cube.
Yeah, hello. Ellen Sild, Pakbox Limited. Thank you for an interesting discussion, but you haven't mentioned another sustainable alternative for meat. It's edible insects. Could you please comment that field? Maybe Päivi, success story of the Fazer.
Go for it.
Yeah, so we launched at the end of November last year a cricket bread, and we see that as one way to kind of create an alternative, like a food solution for people. And it was a great success. Unfortunately, we cannot sell it in other countries in our home markets except Finland, but that was a huge success. And it tastes good. That's a question that we often get.
There's another, actually, something we haven't talked about is the plant alternatives, the fake meats. Or there's a company called Beyond Meat, for instance, where they're improving the tastes of plants, and they actually sell them in the meat aisle of the supermarket, and the sales went up 30% when they put the plant-based burger, which actually tastes pretty close now. So that's another way that could help reduce that. We have yes, sir.
Hi, Christopher, Wise Events. We create personal development events all around the world, like this one. I have a comment to you, Peter. I think your comment about that we are able to do it better than nature is extremely naive and extremely arrogant. It's like saying that a companion, a sex robot, is equal to finding your soulmate. Of course, I agree with you. I think this is amazing what you're doing here, but taking out that element of the universe or whatever God power that is in every single living being and recreating it and saying it's the same thing, it's arrogant.
I get this one. So it is natural. We're using biology that comes from nature, right? So in a cow, the way it produces meat is there's a process of cell division. The cells just divide. That's why a cow goes from tiny to big. All clean meat is doing is taking those exact same cells, that exact same process of cell division, and just bringing it outside the cow. And hold on. And so if you're against these things, you need to be against all of those things. So insulin, which is an incredibly important medicine for diabetics, used to be derived from animals, but it was too expensive, and there wasn't enough available, and so diabetics died. And so now we make insulin recombinantly using cells.
Okay, we're going to have to take that. That can carry on offline. We have 0 seconds left, but we have enough time just for not the one.
And then back to you.
Okay. We got the go ahead for one last question. Yes.
Hi, my name is
short,
Susanna.
Yep.
Sorry. So I understand that there's a lot of big problems from overproduction, and we have people over-consuming food and throwing away food at home, but also in stores. And then there's the other ugly half in parts of the world where there is malnutrition. So how much is there really to do with just producing less and then rebuilding the infrastructure of production itself?
Anyone want to take that very short and sweet? Who's going to jump in?
You could solve the food system with just more intelligent, like logistical infrastructure, right? If the rich world wasted less and we improved the logistics to bring food to the developing world, it could be solved. But I'm not sure that there's political will or the logistical ability to do that. And so in some sense, I completely agree with you. Like, that is a solution, but is it a practical solution? I don't think so.
Peter, did you?
Well, there's a Dutch saying that says there's more than one road that leads to Rome, and I guess that goes here as well. So you're absolutely right. As are the people who make plant-based products, as are the people who make growing veggies more efficient. It's too late to pursue just one solution. I think we should do a lot in parallel, if it's insects or plants or what have you, but we should do it in parallel. Some of them will probably win, between brackets, in the end. And we'll see what and when and why, but it's too late to put your money on just one horse now.
Great. Okay, I'm going to start off. Variety. Just going straight from that. That's my word for the future of sustainable food. Päivi. Put you on the
Open
spot.
innovation.
Open innovation.
The future of sustainable food is profitable.
Nice.
Experience. It's all about food is experience, and we need to match that to whatever we do.
We need to move more local.
Local. Great. There we go. It's profitable, it's local, it's fresh and exciting. Okay, thank you very much.